Hi, I'm Kevin Brewer, the Northeast Technical Manager for Arboriculture Ecologel. We provide tools and products for every aspect of plant healthcare with a focus on environmental stewardship. Today we're here to discuss the top 5 reasons I hear people don't want to get into plant healthcare, but more importantly, we're here to convince you otherwise. Yeah, the medicinals and the application methods have changed greatly over the last 4 decades, even just the last 2 decades that I've been in plant healthcare applications. For example, in the 80s, when they used to treat for spongy moth, big infestations in the Northeast, a common way to treat for that was they would tow behind big blower fans behind pickup trucks, and it would kind of just drip pesticides over that fan and just mist it up into the trees. A lot of people were very uncomfortable with that. You definitely couldn't do that nowadays in many scenarios. And for one, it was also a broad spectrum product that they were using back then, which affects more than just spongy moth. Nowadays, we have chemicals that are much more pointed in application. They're much less broad spectrum. So if you do have to do a large foliar application, you can target something like Lepidoptera, which would be a spongy moth, and not affect other types of insects that may be beneficial to the area. We also have methods now where you could inject a tree, basically give it a shot to treat for an infestation. And again, that's a very targeted way of doing it, not disrupting the entire environment. You're not disrupting a neighborhood. The applicator is not doing any pouring, measuring, mixing. There's extremely limited exposure to the applicator. The second reason I hear a lot of people don't like getting involved in plant healthcare is they think there's way too much paperwork involved. They think, the state wants all these records. If you're an applicator, you have to keep track of where you used something, when you used it, why you used it, weather conditions, location. And there is a lot of notes involved in plant healthcare, but you're not taking those notes as just a throwaway, somebody wants records. Those records that you keep are a roadmap to your future success. You can look back at those records year over year and see what pest did I treat at what time with what, and was it successful? And then you can repeat that process in the future. So the more paperwork you keep and the better notes you have, you're really just writing your own journal to success as you grow your plant healthcare business. It's not just for the state to be able to come in and say, what did you do when? You're actually building your programs and finding what's best for you and your people. So another great reason for keeping good records is you can start to do tree inventories and plant inventories on customers' property. So you can start to know what kind of trees they have, whether they have ash, maple, oak. And then when you get new invasive species, like when emerald ash borer was coming to Rhode Island, I started taking notes of what customers I had that had ash trees when it was still 400 or 500 miles away. Just so that when it did get there, I knew who already had put in cables in ash trees, pruned them, deadwooded them, who put money into ash trees that cared about them. And then we could have some direct marketing through going back in that paperwork and finding exactly where those trees were, what pests are coming. And it helps you grow your business much quicker, rather than always waiting on a customer to call you to tell you where there's a problem. One of the best things you can do to streamline your bookkeeping is consistency. Don't change your methods on how you record things. If you go out and you do your proposals when you're inspecting properties or investigating and you have an Andromeda with lacebug and you want to treat it in April, you would want to always write it in the same fashion, the month, the plant, the pest, and not kind of mix that up and go pest, plant, month. You want to keep everything in the same order in how you write things. Because a lot of times in the customer management software, you can search through for certain numbers or phrases. So if I wanted to find every customer I wanted to do a treatment in April for, I could just search the number 4. The third issue I hear from people that keep them kind of away from plant healthcare is they're worried about more of a boom and bust in their schedule. They think they'll be too busy in some parts of the year and not busy enough, not have a consistent workload. And that's what you're looking for in business, is you want to have consistent staff and consistent workload throughout the season. Things will vary from location, northeast, southeast, southwest. But in general, with the way medicinals work nowadays, if you were to treat everything like things used to be done 20 years ago, and you treated a problem when you saw it, this bug popped up, this is when I need to treat it. This is when this disease is here, it's when I need to treat it. But now with some of the systemics we use through tree injection, we can treat in the fall for a pest that may be a problem in the spring, rather than trying to get everybody out there in the spring to treat the same properties at the same time all across the state. And same thing with disease issues. We've noticed a lot in the last 10 years that using plant growth regulators actually helps with many diseases like sycamore anthracnose, apple scab, issues with poplars, and drought resistance. So when you see that issue in the summer come up, that foliar issue when it's too late to treat, you can put a plant growth regulator down at that point and get great results for the next season. So you're not always so backed up to do everything in the spring. Other things that plant healthcare might open you up to for more work is, for example, again with oak wilt, the treatment for that may be in the summer, but you can't prune oak trees during the summer. You can only prune them in the winter. So you do have other work to do. Once you start treating them, then those are also your customers where you're going to do the pruning and the deadwooding and the other structural work that may need to be done, and that's going to give you extra winter work to carry through as well. Other good things to do with plant healthcare is a lot about education. And the winter is a perfect time to kind of double down on that. And it's also a great time to maintain your equipment. When spring hits, some years it's 3 weeks earlier than others, so you want to make sure your equipment's ready to go at a moment's notice. So it's a great time to get all your equipment maintained, have all your technicians have their certifications up to date with their recertification credits and classes. I used to have applicators pick one disease or one insect and just write a report about it. So everybody learned one new pest really well every season. And then they could share with each other, read each other's work, and they liked it. They were excited about it. It gave them something to do, but it's educational. And again, you're getting the equipment ready to go. So there's lots of stuff to do in that downtime to kind of sharpen up your senses and get ready for the next season. One thing arborists might not be used to if they haven't done plant healthcare before is you need recertification credits to keep your applicator's license. And the winter is a perfect time to get that extra education and get those CEUs down, because a lot of us that do the educational seminars, we focus our time on the winter because we know that's when you're available to watch these classes and take the webinars that are provided throughout the industry. Your local, ISA chapters, TCIA, there's lots of resources out there that are focusing education on the winter times or the slower times of the year, because that's when you're going to be available to take those classes. Yeah, the fourth common reason I hear people don't want to get into plant health care is they just don't think it's cool. When they're used to being a tree climber, and it's a very exciting job being a tree climber or a tree feller. When I started out in the industry, I started out as dragging brush to the chipper, and I was like, and I really want to make the mess. I don't want to clean it up anymore. And it was really exciting getting up there and taking trees down and using all that large equipment. But after a while, you get used to it. It's not as exciting as it always was. So I started getting into plant health care a little more, not only because I wanted something a little more out of my career, but I knew climbing trees for the rest of my professional life wasn't really sustainable. I had to do something else. But the more I started looking into the landscape and realizing when trees looked like they were growing really well and looking into what was around them and the scenario that maybe why they're doing so well versus when I see that same species somewhere else that maybe is doing poorly, putting that puzzle together was it's a really interesting aspect of arboriculture. You're going to see different insects. Some are predatory, some are bad, but there's just so many things you can put together, and it's just so much more interesting versus exciting. There's not many there's exciting moments in plant healthcare. There's, when you go back to a tree a year later and see that it's doing so much better than it was a year ago, and the customer's like, you turn this tree around, there's definitely plenty of excitement in it. But I find it a much more interesting field than tree climbing itself. So as exciting as climbing trees and taking them down is, and the crashing and the booming and the big equipment, you need to get past that. Just because it's exciting doesn't mean it's a good business model. So adding more things into your business portfolio by doing plant healthcare, by doing tree planting, pruning, and removals, you've got a much more balanced business, which is going to lead to much better growth, much more consistent growth than just always focusing on what you think is fun. So it's good to expand into other aspects of arboriculture than just tree climbing and tree removals. The fifth reason that I hear most commonly that people shy away from plant healthcare is they really don't know where to start. But it's really not as complicated as a lot of people think it might be. In most given areas, there's 3 pests or problems that cause 95% of the tree decline. That could be palm weevil, it could be pine bark beetles, it could be emerald ash borer, but those are, prominent issues, some regional, some national. But they're key contributors to plant health issues in their given area. So just learning your top 3 problems in your territory is going to open up that market for you to be able to go to your customers and say, we can treat this tree. Yeah, there's great organizations for arborists to join, like the TCIA and the ISA. These 2 organizations have tons of educational seminars, events, conferences, and trade shows. And it's just a great way to meet a lot of people in the industry and start getting those answers. There's also many other smaller events like webinars and certifications online that you can go through just to get those credits and learn about those different problems in your area. Sometimes it's more local, put on by your local extension, like Q's in Connecticut does a lot of the work there. You can submit samples to them. So their research is something you can also follow. Most of them have monthly newsletters as well to follow plant healthcare. Another way you can find a lot of good information in your area is manufacturer representatives. The manufacturers of the solutions for plant healthcare problems want nothing more than to talk about their solutions and the research behind them. They get very excited about it. You call them up and say, hey, we've got something wrong with this tree. Not only can they help you explain what the problem is, but what the solution is and how to treat for it. It's kind of like the whole wrapped up package in one. From going from one question, now you've got the entire solution from just a couple different connections. So just building that network with other arborists involved in plant healthcare is a great way to learn a ton about it. When we're first starting, we kind of need to rely on people with that kind of knowledge and that kind of passion for the tree industry where their whole career is dedicated now to plant healthcare and research. So if you find something they know how to solve, they're excited to tell you how they figured it out or what the research behind it is, what works and when. And if you happen to find something that a manufacturer doesn't know about, then they're even more excited because that means it's going to start a whole new project of research and it may be a new pest, and they're going to look into it and get the right contacts to try to get you answers. But these are the people that are probably the most driven to try to help you build a plant healthcare program is going to be your manufacturer representatives. So to kind of tie all that together into how I got into plant healthcare 15 years ago or so, is there was a local pest that was killing quite a few oak trees around southern New England. I asked around some other companies, and we were taking a lot of trees down. It was getting pretty ugly. A lot of customers had a lot of questions, and we couldn't provide any answers. And that's not where you want to be when people are losing trees that you've been taking care of for sometimes as a family business, it could be decades that you've cared for that tree. So it really pushed the company I was with to go further and say, all right, we need to get into plant healthcare. We need to figure out what's going on and find some solutions. And the more we called, we realized there wasn't a lot of answers out there. A lot of people knew about more common things, but so eventually we reached out to a company that was doing research on it, and they were a manufacturer representative. And we said, what do you see with this issue? What are you researching? What do you got going on? And at first there wasn't a lot of answers, but within a year they had figured out what the problem was and what a slam dunk treatment was for it. So then we were able to go out, provide those treatments with great success and save those trees. And that kind of opened our eyes up as a mostly tree removal and tree pruning company with the right connections, the right questions, the right kind of like passion and drive to save trees for our customers when we realized nobody had the answer why they were dying and we needed it. We were able to find the right answers just by asking a lot of questions, building our network. And then that inspired us to just get even more into it. We're like, well, if we can solve this problem, then we can solve that problem. If we can figure out what's going on, and just one thing led to another. And again, it was all just kind of that putting all the puzzle together and saving trees, and it just kind of blew our business model wide open. Where we went from kind of seasonal trimming and removals to then being a whole tree service company with plant healthcare and pruning. Well, that wraps up the top 5 reasons I hear people don't want to get into plant healthcare, but I really hope we've inspired you to start your journey into the plant healthcare industry.